Okay, we're now ready to attack chapter number 3. Chapter number 3 deals with informal fallacies. We'll go through this briefly, and then once again, this is one of those chapters where class discussion will probably be in order for us to be able to accomplish everything that we need to do. So what is a fallacy? It's a flaw in the argument. In one way or another, it's a flaw. There's two types of fallacies. The first is a formal fallacy having to do with a defect in the form of an argument. So go back to section 1.5 where we were writing them out. All A are B, no B are C, some A are C, right? So we look at it in that arena. That was pretty good coming off the top of my head, especially after today like today. But the second one is an informal fallacy, and the form appears correct, but the argument contains some type of a flaw. And we find this a lot in our culture today. So we want to look at these, and as we go through them, you're going to start picking up ideas and concepts of where you say, oh, yeah, I saw that on a commercial, I saw it on a political ad, I saw it on a news broadcast. News people do a lot of fallacies. A lot of times we see fallacies being done on the news. And we always find it, especially in courts of law and places where arguments take place. So the first thing we want to deal with in section 3.2 is fallacies of relevance. Okay, ask the listener to draw conclusions on the basis of information that is irrelevant to the argument. A lot of times we have arguments where the information has nothing to do with what it is we're talking about. So we want to go through this section and understand that all the fallacies have something in common, but there's something that separates them, and so let's look at them in each one as its own. The first one would be the appeal to force. This poses a conclusion and threatens the listener with bad consequences if they don't accept the conclusion. It also involves some kind of implicit or explicit. Implicit would be a hint towards a threat. Explicit would be an actual threat. So an example would be, I'm sure you will all agree that I deserve a good teacher evaluation. Otherwise, I will have to give you that extra difficult final exam that I've been working on. In this case, what am I doing? I'm threatening you with either give me a good teacher evaluation. If I don't get them, then I'm going to take it out on you in the long run. So you'll be punished if you don't give it to me. Okay. Now, obviously, this is hypothetical. I don't see the teacher evaluation until long after the semester is over, but you get the idea. It's a good illustration to give the idea. Not a fallacy would be to say you should pay your taxes on time because late filers are assessed a penalty. There's no fallacy there. In this case, I'm not posing a threat. The bad consequence is a result of a bad action. The consequence is supported by the conclusion. Okay. If you don't pay your taxes on time, you're going to get a penalty assessed. It's as easy as that. Okay. The second type of fallacy is the appeal to pity. Whenever a speaker attempts to evoke pity on the listener to get the conclusion accepted. So an example of that would be, you need to give me a good teaching evaluation. If I don't get one, I will not get a raise, and I won't be able to feed my cute puppy Zoe. Now, this is not my puppy. I have no idea if it's Zoe, but it is a cute puppy, I guess, if you like puppies. So, gives a good illustration. Now, if we compare it to the last one, which was appeal to force, that applied to me as a teacher threatening you, right, with a consequence. Appeal to pity has more effect to me, applies to you as a student in responding to the pity. Another example of appeal to pity would when a student comes to me and says, I really need to get an A in this class so that I can get into CU. Right? I need my GPA up, and so I really need an A in this class so I can get into CU. Well, if you really need an A in the class and work, and you'll get one. Right? But once again, it's an appeal to pity. It's an appeal to saying, I'm not sure if I'll make it if you don't help me. So I need you to help me out, right? And so that's the concept that we have here. Not a fallacy for this would be you should spay your dog because the overpopulation of dogs leads to the euthanasia of thousands of dogs annually. Even though the argument may engender pity, the conclusion is still related to the premise, right? You should spay your dogs. Why? Because of overpopulation, right? A third one would be what we call the appeal to people. And there's two types. There's a direct and there's an indirect. So first look at the direct one. It uses emotionally charged language to engender support of a conclusion. So I'm going to get you to support my conclusion by playing on your emotion, right? All compassionate, peace-loving people need to band together to oppose the president's warmongering policy. Okay, now emotionally charged language, right? Compassionate, peace-loving, band together, oppose, and then the word warmongering, right? Those are the kinds of things where I'm appealing directly to you. I'm not trying to even veil it, right? I'm just giving it to you blunt and straight, right? Appeal to people indirect. There's three different types of this, and they tie the conclusion. And I got a note over here. Tie the conclusion into the group someone wants to be a part of. So here's what we're doing. A bandwagon argument. Accepts the conclusion because everybody else does. You should buy a Honda because more people drive Hondas than any other automobile. Okay, so I'm appealing to getting you on the bandwagon, right? The vanity part would say, accept the conclusion because admired people accept the conclusion. You should drive a Lexus because that's what Bono and and Al Gore drive. So you should drive one as well. So you're looking at somebody that you would look up to and say, because they drive this, you should drive this, right? The third one would be an appeal to snobbery. This accepts the conclusion because the elite do. You should subscribe to the Wall Street Journal because 70% of corporate CEOs do. Okay, how many people on the street do you know that read the Wall Street Journal? Okay, and so because they're similar, notice this is a key point. Because they're similar, you're not going to be asked to distinguish the different types. You just have to say whether it's direct or indirect. Okay. The next one would be ad hominem. An ad hominem occurs when the arguer attacks an argument by attacking the person making the argument or someone associated with the argument. If someone makes their expertise part of the argument, then attacking them is okay. Hitler's a good example of this. For the exam, you'll need to know three types, okay? Hitler, we attack Hitler and we attack certain things because he's associated with them. Okay, even though he's a brilliant man. Okay, I mean, if we read Hitler, we find that he was actually very, very brilliant. He just used his brilliance in some inhumane ways, right? But once again, keeping those kinds of things in mind. So ad hominem, you attack when the arguer attacks the argument by attacking the person who made the argument. Okay. For the exam, there's three types of these you'll need to know. The first one would be an abusive. Attacks the argument by attacking the character or qualifications of the arguer. So an example, Bill Clinton argues that we should negotiate with the Iranians. But Bill Clinton is a known philanderer who has lied under oath. Therefore, we should not negotiate with the Iranians. Okay, in the example of this, we need to look at Bill Clinton's argument and not his character. So ad hominem abusive is we've abused him. We've abused the fallacy, right? Because we're attacking the argument based on his character, not based on what the argument's really talking about. Okay? Not a fallacy would be if Professor Cummings says that based on his expertise in astronomy, we should expect a major meteor to hit the Earth in the next 5 years. However, Cummings is known to have plagiarized his work and has falsified predictions in the past to grab headlines. Therefore, it's not likely that his predictions will come true. In this case, Professor Cummings is making his reliability and expertise part of the argument, so therefore it's not a fallacy to attack it because he's the one who brought it into the argument. Okay? So keep that in mind when we talk about it. Oops. Ad hominem circumstantial. It's argued that the argument is flawed because the arguer stands to gain from the conclusion. So the lawyers of Ford presented evidence that a structural flaw in their automobile did not cause a series of accidents. Since they're paid by Ford Corporation, we can discount the evidence. Again here, we have to focus on the evidence and not on who presents it, right? So having them being paid by Ford Corporation has nothing to do with the argument. But what it is somebody trying to distract from the argument, right? And so that's why it would be a fallacy. The third type of ad hominem fallacy is called tu quoque, and it states that the argument is incorrect because the arguer acts in a way contrary to the conclusion. So an example, Al Gore argues that the burning of fossil fuels is causing catastrophic global warming, but his jet setting and the maintenance of his Tennessee mansion, 35,000 square foot mansion, burn more fossil fuels than most of us could hope to imagine. Therefore, global warming is not a threat. Okay, and so in this case, what have they done? The argument that Gore gives isn't supported by his way of life. He lives contrary to that, so therefore as a result of that, I don't accept the argument. But once again, it's a fallacy, right? It's trying to point out something to distract you away from the real argument. The next type is called an accident, which applies a rule to a case which would generally be accepted as an exception to the rule. You should always answer every test question to the best of your ability. So on this exam, please fill in the areas where asked for your social security number, bank account information, and credit card information. Okay? So, it's a rule outside the rule, right? You should always answer every test question, right? Even if you don't know the answer, sometimes it's good to guess because you might be right, right? Especially when if it's wrong, it's wrong, and if it's right, it's right. You might as well try and guess for the extra points. But this is a case that works kind of in the realm of speeding, right? It's, you get pulled over for speeding and, the officer comes and says, you were speeding, and you say, but you don't understand. My wife was just taken to the hospital from work in an ambulance and I'm trying to get there, right? And so what am I trying to do? General acceptance would be, oh, I understand what you're trying to do. However, you shouldn't speed. If you drive regularly, it's safer and you should get there. I probably could possibly get out of a ticket, but you get the idea, all right? So straw man, there's three more here that we want to go over and look at. Straw man fallacy distorts someone's position and then attacks the distortion. Representative Daniel voted against increased education funding. Okay, so that's his position. And then the fallacy is he is clearly opposed to free public education. If he had his way, only the wealthy would have the education necessary to succeed in today's information age. First of all, there's nothing about the information age. Secondly, there's nothing about the wealthy. So what we're seeing is distort the position, and then I'm going to attack what I've distorted. I'm attack the distorted position, right? So that's called the straw man. The next one, which is closely related, is called missing the point, and occurs when the premise seems to indicate one conclusion and a second, more extreme conclusion is drawn. There have been recent cases of food poisoning caused by ingesting spinach. Clearly, we must ban the consumption of vegetables. Now, I'm not opposed to that because I don't like vegetables, but you get the idea of why it's missing the point. A more reasonable conclusion would have something to do with regulating the processing of vegetables or even just the processing of spinach. Okay, so we have a premise and then we have a second one that's much more extreme. Okay, it's been known to cause food poisoning, therefore let's just ban vegetables altogether. A red herring. In the British, when they would be fox hunting and it was time for them to go home and they couldn't get the dogs off the trail of the fox, someone would put a red herring in a burlap sack, tie it behind the horse, and would run perpendicular across the path of the dogs in front of the dogs, so that when the dogs got to the red herring, the scent was so strong they would follow the scent of the red herring and lose the scent of the fox. And then the horseman who had the red herring behind it would run all the way back to the house. Okay? So an example is David argues that Abraham Lincoln was not the great president that many think he was, but Lincoln is on the $5 bill. Paper currency is far more superior to coins because it's easier to carry around. Could you imagine having to carry $5 coins? David is clearly wrong. Okay, so red herring completely changed the subject and went a totally different direction, right? So one of the things we have to grab here is this. There's similarities between the three. Straw man says it takes someone's comment out of context and attacks it. Missing the point, premises that indicate one conclusion draw a more extreme conclusion. Red herring completely changes the subject. If you keep those things in mind, now do the problems for section 3.2. Bring your questions with you from this discussion and from your homework, and we'll put it all in perspective when we meet together in class. Have a good day.